The inside and outside centre. Traditionally, one is part of the spine of the team and a link between the fly half and the outside backs, and the other a creative spark with a license to free roam, pick their moments and help create something for their team. But it's these positions that have caused such a headache for every coach who has ever attempted the seemingly impossible job of being England's boss. Not since England's 2003 campaign with the opposites attract style of centre partnership of Mike Tindall and Will Greenwood has an England coach cracked this meaty midfield conundrum and had a consistent centre partnership. And ever since England have tried rugby league converts, foreign imports, a lot of the time a combination of both, and nothing ever really seems to stick around or ever be seen as a really good fit. But don't worry my friends, as a beacon of knowledge, the bastion of modesty and the fountain of 2003 Rugby World Cup trivia answers, I am here to help. So sit back, relax, and get ready to take every single thing I say as fact. Let's discuss the role of centres in rugby. So firstly, contrary to most rugby video games, saying you play centre is about as incomplete a sentence as saying I play on a games console. Like, what do you mean? Xbox, Switch, PlayStation? Learn words! Anyway, inside centre and outside centre at the top level are completely different positions and not as interchangeable as it might seem. So let's go through what it takes to play each position, starting naturally with playing 12. Now there are two main ways to play inside centre, and the truly world-class players can do both to an outstanding level, like Nonu, and other players like... oh god, is he the only one? I guess you have Francois Steyn, but it's not the same level of ball carrying despite his strength, and he wasn't an out-and-out 12, he's played so many positions, almost a victim of his own talent and dexterity. Really, is there no one else on Nonu's level? Have I just realised writing this that Nonu is the best 12 of all time? Get him to the World Cup! But anyway, the two styles are gainline 12 and distributing 12. Now, gainline 12s come in two sub-forms. You have players like Wesley Fofana, Jean de Villiers, who use their combination of explosive power and agility to make yards for their team, and do what is essentially the extremely simplistic job of the inside centre, which is get your team going forward and on the front foot. And that simplistic explanation brings me to the other method of being a gainline centre, doing it through pure physicality. So for examples of people who do this style well, you have prime 2009 Jamie Roberts. What a player 2009 Jamie Roberts was. You also have Sonny Bill Williams, and currently the best example of this is the pure, brutal pace and explosive power of Ngani Laumape. I know I'm ruining his name, I'm sorry. Who I've already spoken about on this channel as the strongest force in the universe, only rivaled by the actual force and my ego. But anyway, that's the sort of thing that you're looking for in your gainline centres. Either incredible agility, evasiveness, cleverness and skill to break through the defensive line, or pure physicality and an ability to pick a line, or the ability, once put in an extremely uncomfortable situation, to be able to make the most of it just through pure will and strength alone. So now that you know what it takes to be a gainline centre in professional rugby, let's talk about the distributing style of playing inside centre. And first of all, let me explain that I'm not saying that players who can play in the gainline centre style aren't or can't be distributors. That may have been the case in the past for players who played as gainline centres or physical centres or crash ball 12s as they're probably more commonly known. But all of the players that I've mentioned, as well as most of, if not all, professional players in the role of inside centre have to be distributors in the mod of the game. It's just what's expected of professional players these days. But it's not their strength, it's not what they get in the team for, and it's not the reason they get paid the big bucks. And because it's not their strength, unless your name is Nonu, where you learn to become a master of both, here is the other type of inside centre, the distributor. Otherwise known as the distributing 12, otherwise known as the playmaking 12, otherwise known as the creative 12, otherwise known as what every coach does when he realises his centres don't pass enough, and you have two really good players who can play 10 in the squad. So the distributing 12, often used as a way of getting a team with outstanding outside backs more of the ball, as well as allowing a team to play with a lot more width than they usually would. Examples of this would include the way Wasps used Jimmy Gopuff's versatility to become one of the hardest teams to defend and of scrums in the world, with him and Cipriani making it impossible to know what option they would take. A similar tactic was used by Bath when they had Carl Eastman at 12 alongside George Ford at fly half. You very rarely find out-and-out 12s who play like this at the top level. Maybe it's due to the weather in this country or our culture and traditions when it comes to players playing in the centres, which basically boils down to saying get that big lad in the forwards, and if he's fast, get him in the centres. Carl Eastman seems to be the only example that I can think of off the top of my head, but even he was a convert from Rugby League where he basically played their version of 10 anyway. Which brings me on to the truth that you probably have already guessed, that this style of playing inside centre isn't usually played by out-and-out centres, it's usually played by fly halves playing out of position due to selection or being slightly too erratic when they're in the 10 jersey, or it's played by other creative players who are just being shoehorned into the backline. The Australians seem to be the chief pioneers of this type of 12, people like Elton Flatley, James O'Connor, Curtly Beale, Quay Cooper, all have filled this role for the Wallabies, and of course the most successful and best player who uses this style of playing 12, Matt Giteau. The Australians seem to, although they have slightly moved away from this approach, be big advocates for getting as many ball playing creative players on the pitch at the same time. If you want a good example of this, watch Australia absolutely outmaneuver England in the 2015 World Cup, where they had the audacity to have Foley at 10, Giteau at 12, and then bring Beale on at fullback. It was a filthy masterclass of 10s passing a team off the park. You may be wondering how come this happens so much. Well, a lot of reasons actually. Sometimes coaches have a young talented fly half in their squad and will put them in at 12 to learn their trade, as they will be getting used to playing at a higher level without being completely thrown into the deep end, dealing with the stresses of ordering senior players around when you're a young man, as well as dealing with all the traffic coming your way at 12. Gets 10s used to the physicality of men's rugby, but all the while having two people either side of you in case something doesn't go quite right in defence to help you out, which is a lot more palatable a prospect for a young man compared to the uncertainty of missing a tackle at 10 on your inside and praying your 7 is covering you. Furthermore, I have explained before, it gives coaches so much more width in attack, and having a fly half level passer at 12, not only to throw longer passes but also to put people through holes, which is a massive part of inside centre's role within a team, which neatly concludes my explanation on the two styles of inside centre play and brings me on to the person they may be putting through the hole, the outside centre. So England in 2016 to 2017, before it went horribly wrong, seemed to be the only international team to do this off the top of my head and get away with it. And the thing they got away with is not putting in a counterbalanced centre partner. Let me explain. So, like inside centre, outside centre has different ways to play as well, but with playing 13 there are 3 ways to do it, and all with a lot of room to free roam and experiment. And the reason there are 3 instead of 2 is that one of them is basically to play as a gain line 12. For examples of players who do this, look at the way players like Bastareaud, Tuolangi and Tavita Kundrani and Bentio, when he plays 13, play the game. All of these players are used by their teams to go forward, with the 2 subcategories I mentioned before still applying in terms of ways to do this, but the pure strength type usually being the safe and preferred option. However, these players still do have the ability to make an outside break and put their outside backs into space. Well, maybe except Bastareaud, but he makes up for it with his offloading game, and in France they seem to do what they want. Like now he's playing number 8. But anyway, all these types of outside centres are usually deployed when you have a creative distributing 12 in the team, so that you can crash it up when you need to. Examples are Tuolangi with Matt Tamua and Carl Eastman at Leicester, Bantia moving out to 13 when England play Ford and Farrow at 10 and 12, Kundrani with Matt Giteau for the Wallabies in 2015, which was delicious, and with Leo Lefano when Leo Lefano is at 12 at the Brumbies. But England in Eddie Jones's golden period didn't pick a counterbalance style centre partner for those 2 glorious seasons with the team, and the reason England can get away with that is they had 2 Vunipolas who got so much go forward that they didn't need a ball carrying 6 or 13 in the side, which allowed for the relatively lightweight centre partnership of Owen Farrell and Jonathan Joseph. But having those kind of ball carrying forwards is extremely rare, and a counterbalance centre partnership is usually a good idea. And since I've already brought up Jonathan Joseph, he is the perfect example of a mixture of the 2 types of outside centre, which I'm dubbing Linebreak Merchant and Creative Magician, brackets, the glue. Now, Linebreak Merchants are those type of centres who can disappear in a game, but when they have an opportunity to turn on the jets and go against a weak shoulder or make a line break, they're all over it. These players are a beautiful combination of power and pace, and tend to be either converted wingers or players who still have the ability to play on the wing. The best player who I've seen master the art of being a line break merchant is the legend Tana Umanga. And if you're looking for the best modern examples of this style, look no further than the 2 best Fijian backs playing in France. Yes, I said the best. Virami Vakatawa and Semi Radraja. Oh god, watching these 2 in full flight is just therapeutic, with Vakatawa being a bit of a magician to add on to all of his athletic talent. And speaking of magicians, the other style, Creative Magicians, brackets, the glue. Now, the Creative Magician role can be as important or unimportant as the player who is playing at 13. What I mean by this is the Creative Magician role can be played simply by a player whose main skill is being the glue that holds the backline together. It can be with their passing, accuracy and kicking game, like Owen Farrell in his early days at Saracens where he played 13, and more recently Marcelo Bosch's role at Saracen. More impressive examples include players like Ryan Crotty, a player who can mould himself into any situation and fit whatever the team needs in that moment. We can call these people understated magicians. Other synonyms include understated glue or pure glue, patent pending. Now onto the other end of the spectrum, where you have your Brian O'Driscolls, your players who are there to make something happen and put your outside backs in good positions. They are Gandalfs with good distribution, Merlins with movement, wand-wielding wizards in the wide channels. Your modern examples for reference are pretty far and few between in terms of world-class masters of witchcraft and wizardry. The most obvious example I can think of is Charles Piutau when he played 13 for Wasps 3 years ago. That was just magique. But England actually have someone who I believe to be really special in the form of Henry Slade, who embodies the spirit of being permanent glue. Other synonyms for this level of magician and glue master include Wizarding Prodigy for your young and up-and-comer, Sword of Gryffindor for your Charles Piutau level talent, not quite bod but not far off, and of course Pure Dumbledore for your bod level talent and above. Now that I have talked about all the attacking responsibilities and styles of playing in the midfield, it's time to discuss the defensive duties of the midfield. Now, luckily there aren't as many styles and variations and differences around how you play inside and outside centre in defence, as you mainly operate as a 3 working with your fly half to come off the line and drift across and do whatever you need to do to stop an attack. But there are some key differences, so let's discuss them. Now, you can get specialist defensive centres who pride themselves on being hard bastards, who attacks should fear and are known for putting their bodies on the line for their team. They are often referred to as defensive leaders. Now, these players can play in either the 12 or 13 jersey, but their effectiveness in this role is diminished or enhanced depending on the situation and position. Allow me to explain the defensive responsibilities of 12 and 13 using Brad Barrett, resident hardman and leader of the Saracens' defensive line. He has the ability to play either 12 or 13, as his attributes can be utilised in both positions. At 12 he is given the opportunity to line up his opponents, as it is one of the busiest channels in terms of defensive work, but with the added bonus that it's quite a crowded channel whenever people come down it, so he most of the time knows exactly who he has to tackle, and this allows him to line people up and smoke them. Now, when he plays 13, the defensive work is slightly different, as outside centre operates in the most isolated channel in rugby. The 13 channel is basically from the 15 metre line to the touchline, usually and ideally the link between the wingers and the rest of the defence. Now, this channel ideally should be patrolled by one of your best one-on-one defenders, and it's probably why a lot of wingers can slot into playing 13 a lot easier than people from other positions. But if you know anything about defending on the wings or in the 15 metre channel, it's very rare at the top level that the tackles are extremely dominant hits, because it's very rarely a rugby league midfield style collision with limited movement from the ball carrier and a defender just monstering someone. It's usually a desperate attempt from one fast and strong person to stop another fast and strong person in full flight. And that's basically what defending at 13 is like most of the time, with it being the most stressful off scrums on the side of the pitch, with an attack having so much space to play in, and the outside centre having so much ground to cover to get to his winger, and then to get them both in good defensive shape to make the tackle, and of course not doing that too early and leaving your 12 in no man's land, leaving space for a blindside winger or centre to slide through. And yes, Brad Barrett can rush up a lot easier at 13 and make a big hit on someone behind the game line, but it's an extremely risky tactic unless all your teammates know what you're doing every time, and if you even mistime it slightly, your team is exposed on the outside and it's literally all your fault. For example of this, watch him playing 13 in the 2015 World Cup, where he rushes up against Wales and a simple mispass allows the winger to run down the wing and eventually score. That is literally all because he shot out the line, and I'm still annoyed about it, if you couldn't tell. So in conclusion, defending at 12 is easier, but you have to make more tackles, whereas defending at 13 requires incredible reading of the game where less tackles are made, but more decisions are made, and your tackles, if they are missed, will often result in tries for the opposition. And that makes it the hardest position to defend on the field, fact. And if you have a defensive hard-man leader type of a player, like Brad Barrett, Pat McCabe, Brian Lima, they will probably be most effective at 12, but if they are an excellent defensive reader who has the athletic talent to take down anyone who comes at him one-on-one, you put him at 13. And I'm just going to put this random picture of Jonathan Davis, who I've realised over the course of me writing this might actually be the best all-round 13 in the world. So many epiphanies this lesson. And that is where we'll end it today in my class. I hope you have enjoyed, and thank you so much for attending. Signed, NGJ. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe and turn the notification bell on to let you know when I upload. You can also follow me on social media at NGJ Rugby. Thank you again, and see you around.